The clapping felt like pins on my skin. We were packed into the small conference room beside the NICU, where a line of incubators sat behind the glass like quiet moons. The chief medical officer praised Patrice for her brilliant cost-saving measures, and she lifted her chin, smiling like she had saved the hospital by herself. I kept my eyes on incubator number 47. Last night, its alarm had hesitated, a slow blink instead of a shout. For a preemie, 8 seconds could be everything. I clapped, because everyone else clapped. My palms shook, and I tucked them under the table so no one saw. Patrice's gaze skimmed the room and stopped on me, as if daring me to disagree. I forced a steady breath and reminded myself what Dad always said. Calm is not weak. When the meeting broke, I forgot my pen by the maintenance cart and lifted the last log sheet, sliding it into my pocket. I told myself I was only protecting patients. Still, the move felt like a match struck in a dry field. I walked past the glass and looked at the tiny fists curled inside the blue light. "Documentation saves lives," I whispered. The words steadied me more than applause ever could. The next afternoon, I came in and found my name moved across the schedule like a chess piece. Every shift for the next month was overnight. A sticky note, written in Patrice's neat loops, hung by the break room clock. "Hope you're a night owl, Maddie." Someone had added a smiley face. I snapped a photo and stared at the timestamp. My eyes burned, but I refused to give her the scene she wanted. I folded the schedule into my pocket, right next to the maintenance log. On my way to the unit, my phone buzzed. It was Raul. His voice tried to be bright, but I knew the edges. "We lost the Riverside contract," he said. "Out of nowhere. They said they found a cheaper vendor, newer stock." I turned to the window, watching traffic crawl. Riverside was our biggest hospital account after ours. "We'll figure it out," I told him, even as my stomach dipped. Patrice walked by, all perfume and power, and tapped the schedule with 2 fingers. "Some of us adapt," she said sweetly. I smiled like stone. When I hung up, I washed my hands slowly, counted to 20, and walked into the NICU as if nothing had just shifted under my feet. At home, we ate in a circle around the quiet. Our son asked for more peas, and Raul handed them over with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. After we tucked our boy into bed, we sat at the kitchen table with the old calculator between us. Numbers looked smaller when they were yours. "If we lose one more account," Raul said softly, "I'll have to cut hours, maybe even let people go." He rubbed his jaw like it hurt. His shop was a second home to half our friends. I reached for his hand and squeezed. "We'll protect what matters," I said. I got up to refill the kettle, then slipped into the bathroom while the water heated. I pulled a thin notebook from beneath the towels and wrote a single word on the first page in block letters. Timeline. Beneath it, I wrote the date, Raul's call, the schedule change, the Riverside loss. A slow map began to form in my head. When I stepped back into the kitchen, an email alert pinged on my phone. Mortgage payment overdue. I stared at the screen until the kettle screamed. I turned off the flame, poured the tea, and told Raul we would sleep, then fight in the morning. The night stretched long. Around 2 a.m., incubator number 47's oxygen curve dipped like a falling bird. The alarm should have screamed. Instead, it blinked after a delay that rolled like slow thunder. I didn't wait. I opened the port, adjusted the mask seal, and called out for a blood gas. 2 milliliters, I told the resident, already moving. We stabilized the baby, tiny chest rising under the warm glow. My hands shook after, not from fear, but from anger. I documented every detail, time, readings, actions taken, the exact second the alarm engaged. I sent the incident to biomedical engineering and CC'd Patrice, the unit's inbox, and myself. Patrice replied in under a minute, "Noted, no further action required." The words sat on the screen like ice. Later, when I stepped into the service corridor, the head of maintenance leaned against the wall, arms folded. He lowered his voice. "You didn't hear it from me, but you're not the first to complain. We've had 3 tickets already, all closed." His eyes flicked toward Patrice's office door. "Everything goes through her." I thanked him, walked to the staff bathroom, locked the stall, and copied my incident note into the timeline. The quiet hum of the vents sounded like warning. 2 days later, Patrice called me into her office. The blinds were half closed, slicing light into stripes across the desk. She smiled with only her lips and slid a stapled packet toward me. "Performance improvement plan," she said. "Concerns, poor teamwork, resistant to innovation, negativity on shift. I read slowly, nothing specific, no dates, no actions. The boxes for incident examples were blank. I looked up. I'll sign to acknowledge receipt, I said, not agreement. I wrote it in the margin. She watched my pen like a knife. Copies, I asked. She made a show of printing 2, then kept one and handed me the other with a tilt of her head. You're smart, she said softly. Smart people know which way the wind blows. She leaned back, lacing her fingers. Be careful, Maddie. Your family depends on this paycheck. My chest went tight, but my voice stayed level. My family depends on safe equipment, I answered. Her smile thinned. I stood, tucked the pip into my binder, and left before my anger could catch fire. In the hallway, the chief nursing officer walked past me toward Patrice's door. I stepped aside, held my breath, and pressed my palm to the cool wall until my heartbeat slowed to something I could use. Raul came home pale, like the light had been washed out of him. He set his tool bag down with a careful clink, then pulled a crumpled printout from his pocket. Another hospital had canceled orders, effective immediately. Their note was polite and cold. New vendor offers higher efficiency and current models. He sat at the edge of our couch and stared at the floor. I upgraded everything last year, he said. Nothing we stock is out of date. I believed him. I stocked shelves with him on weekends and could name every model by heart. I made tea and listened. When he finally looked up, worry carved lines at the corners of his mouth. It feels coordinated, he said, like someone is whispering that we're behind. Patrice's perfume drifted through my memory, followed by her thin smile. I did not say the name out loud. Instead, I walked to the desk, opened my notebook, and turned to the timeline. I added the new cancellation with the date and the initials of the supply manager who had called him. Then I said, if she came for both of us, she made a mistake. Raul frowned. Why? Because she connected our stories, I answered. And I document. On the next set of nights, the unit felt like a ship in fog. I moved quiet and steady, checking equipment twice, sometimes 3 times, just to be sure. Around 3 a.m, I stood by the coffee machine, watching the dark drip into a paper cup. Riley, the respiratory therapist, bumped the cabinet with her hip and gave me a tired grin. We had shared enough emergencies to trust each other's instincts. You notice the vents? She said softly. The new ones? Feels like the airflow is inconsistent on certain settings. I kept my voice neutral. Which lots? She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. I wrote them down, and I traced the vendor. Patrice pushed it through procurement. Brightwell Medical Supplies. Brand new name. No accreditation number on their site. That's not normal. I took the list and read the lot codes twice. My stomach tightened as recognition sparked. Brightwell had appeared the day Raul lost Riverside. I'm not making accusations, Riley said, but I don't like rolling dice in this unit. Neither do I said. Send me any alarms you see. Time, setting, lot. She nodded. Before she walked away, she squeezed my shoulder. Careful, she murmured. She plays sharp. By noon, after I slept a few hours, I drove back to the hospital library and printed the whistleblower and retaliation policy. I highlighted protection language until the page looked like sunrise. The words were simple. Good faith reporting was protected. Documentation kept in accordance with policy was allowed. Retaliation was forbidden. I scanned the pages into a single PDF and emailed HR with a cheerful subject line, policy question for staff education. My note was polite. I asked for clarification about where to store patient safety documentation and whether copying emails to a personal, encrypted drive for reporting was allowed. HR replied in under an hour. Yes, within scope of policy and without PHI. Their message ended with a line that felt like a hand at my back. Thank you for taking safety seriously. Minutes later, Patrice forwarded me the same policy with the subject, friendly reminder, no message body. I saved both emails into the folder on my personal drive labeled NICU Compliance Evidence. That afternoon, I updated the timeline with policy citations and the exact phrasing from HR. Then I sat at the kitchen table and practiced saying facts out loud without heat, dates, times, lot numbers, serial numbers, no adjectives. I pressed my palms flat and told myself, calm is a tactic, not a mood. The next night, the unit hummed like a low hive. At 1:14 a.m., a baby's oxygen saturation dropped from 94 to 84 in a blink. Incubator number 47's alarm should have screamed. Instead, it paused like it was thinking. I didn't wait. I lifted the port, secured the mask, and called for a stat blood gas. Check the tubing, I told the resident. I want eyes on every connection. We stabilized the little one, and the room settled. I checked the serial plate on the incubator and wrote the number on a sticky note, then snapped a photo with a timestamp. I documented each action in the chart, then sent a message to biomedical engineering with the details and the serial number. I CC'd the unit inbox, compliance, and myself. As I closed the note, a maintenance tech rolled by, pushing a cart of parts. He glanced at the machine and shook his head. All of these came in on the same sign-off, he said quietly. Guess who? I didn't answer. I slipped the sticky note into my locker beside the maintenance log and the PIP copy. When I finally sat, I felt the anger again, hot and clean. I opened the timeline on my phone and added the exact delay, 8 seconds. 2 hours before dawn, Riley slid a manila envelope under the break room microwave. For your coffee table, she joked, and left. I made sure the hallway was clear before I opened it. Inside lay last month's supply ledger, copied page by page. Brightwell Medical Supplies appeared in neat lines, large orders, quick payments, approvals marked with Patrice's digital signature. The vendor's tax ID traced to a shell company name I did not recognize. I pressed each page flat, reading the numbers until they told their story. Brand new supplier, no accreditation, high-risk equipment, and our unit as the first test field. At home, Rawl studied the ledger and let out a low whistle. Brightwell undercut me the day they appeared, he said. They matched bids I never shared publicly. He tapped the corner. Someone fed them numbers. I scanned the ledger and filed it in the encrypted folder. I named the file Ledger Brightwell Month 01.pdf because clear labels save time when the room fills with noise. Then I wrote a clean summary for the timeline. Dates, amounts, sign-offs, and the link between Brightwell and the cancellations hitting our shop. When I finished, I washed my hands twice, as if truth left residue. I slept in small pieces. Patrice caught me in the hallway the next morning. Her heels clicked sharp against the tile, her perfume a cloud before she even spoke. Maddie, she purred, her smile too wide. I heard your husband's little shop is struggling. Such a shame. These things happen when people can't keep up. She tilted her head, eyes bright with false pity. Maybe you should be a little more cooperative here at work. Then life might get easier at home. My jaw tightened, but I nodded like a good listener. I said nothing. Silence unsettled her more than argument. She smoothed her blouse and walked away, leaving her words like knives in the air. That night, I sat in my car before clocking in, staring at the dashboard lights. My hand hovered over the ignition before I reached for my phone. The State Department of Health hotline number blinked on the screen from my earlier search. I didn't call to accuse, not yet. Instead, I asked about process, how to report defective medical equipment, what protections existed, and what documentation they required. The operator gave me a case number and explained next steps in a calm, practiced voice. I repeated the number 3 times, then wrote it in my notebook under timeline. For the first time in weeks, I felt my breath steady. I spent the following weekend building a digital folder on my laptop. I named it NICU Compliance Evidence. Inside, I sorted every piece I had. Photos of incubators, maintenance logs, vendor invoices, Patrice's emails, Rawls' canceled contracts, and now the hotline case number. I encrypted the folder with a long password, stored it on a personal drive, and backed it up on a second encrypted USB, which I taped inside the lining of my old lunch bag. I followed the whistleblower policy exactly, no shortcuts. On Sunday night, my inbox pinged with an automated email. Case 1013742 created Department of Health Equipment inquiry. My pulse quickened. It was real now. The paper trail stretched beyond Patrice's control. I added the email to the folder and wrote a summary in my notebook. At work, Patrice strutted through the unit like nothing was wrong. She dropped a stack of forms on my desk and said, "Don't stay up too late filing." I smiled and filed every sheet, date stamping each one. When she walked away, I whispered under my breath, "Every page has your fingerprints." The fluorescent lights hummed, and I felt the strange comfort of evidence stacking into weight she couldn't carry forever. 2 days later, I sat in her office for my PIP review. Patrice leaned back, flipping through her notes like she was reading bedtime stories. "Still struggling with adaptability," she said in a sing-song voice. "Still too rigid, not enough innovation." I kept my face blank. When she paused for breath, I slid a binder across the desk. Inside were pages of patient safety interventions I had made in the past month. Dates, case numbers, infant outcomes, every note cross-checked. Her smile faltered. She flipped a few pages, then pushed the binder back without signing. "I don't acknowledge staff work that doesn't align with team goals," she said sweetly. My pen hovered above the margin. I wrote the date, her refusal, and the time. Then I stood. "Thank you for your feedback," I said, voice even. As I left, I saw the chief nursing officer heading toward Patrice's office with a folder tucked under her arm. She nodded at me in passing, then shut the door behind her. Through the glass panel, I saw their silhouettes. Patrice's hands gestured sharp. The CNO's posture stayed stiff and square. I walked away calmly, but my chest buzzed. The pieces were moving. I pressed my palms together, whispered patience, and returned to the unit. By midweek, whispers filled the corridors. An internal audit request spread hospital-wide. Review vendor procurement records for Brightwell Medical Supplies. Staff traded looks over clipboards. Some muttered about external regulators being tipped off. Others whispered about Patrice's sudden temper, storming down hallways, slamming doors. I sat at my desk documenting patient vitals, my pulse steady. The audit wasn't mine to control. It was the natural ripple of paperwork. Patrice barreled past, her face tight, eyes darting from staff to staff like she was counting enemies. I kept my head bent over the chart, heart racing beneath my calm. At home that night, Raul and I shared quiet relief. "If they're opening records, they'll see the numbers don't add up," he said. I nodded, but added, "She'll fight dirty before it's over." The next morning, as I checked incubator monitors, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from compliance blinked on the screen. "Please attend interview tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your name has been mentioned in connection with procurement concerns." I exhaled, slow and careful. The paper trail had reached them. I slipped my phone away, finished charting, and reminded myself, stick to facts, dates, and logs. Emotions had no place in official minutes. The interview room was small and cold, a rectangular table under buzzing lights. 2 compliance officers sat across from me, their expressions professional but alert. They started with neutral questions. Did I notice any unusual equipment issues? How did I record them? Who approved purchases? I answered calmly, citing dates and serial numbers from memory, cross-checked with notes in my binder. I avoided adjectives. When they asked about vendors, I slid across the copy of the Brightwell ledger Riley had given me. Their eyes sharpened as they flipped through. One officer tapped the page with his pen. "This explains a lot more than you realize," he murmured. I sat still, hands folded, letting silence work for me. They asked if I felt retaliation. I told them about the graveyard schedule change, the fabricated PIP, Patrice's warning about my family depending on my paycheck. I showed them my photo of the schedule note. They collected each document carefully, as if building a puzzle. At the end, they thanked me, voices lower, more serious than before. I walked out into the daylight, squinting against the brightness. My phone buzzed with a text from Raul. "How'd it go?" I typed back. "The truth landed. Now we wait." My fingers trembled only after I hit send. The unit was quieter than usual the next night, like everyone felt the weight of the audit. Around 3 a.m., alarms broke the stillness. Another incubator faltered. Oxygen levels dropped fast. This time, I was already at the bedside. I silenced the faulty alarm manually, adjusted tubing, and gave a quick push of oxygen while the resident checked the infant's blood gas. We stabilized the baby within minutes. Relief spread like a warm tide through the team. Afterward, I documented everything with calm precision. The time, the alarm delay, the intervention. I included the infant's recovery data and attached the photo of the serial plate. I emailed the full report to biomedical engineering and copied the compliance team. I knew Patrice would see it too. Half an hour later, a reply arrived from engineering, with compliance CC'd, confirmed equipment malfunction. Issue will be escalated. I stared at the words, heart thumping with something close to victory. This was no longer my word against hers. Another department had validated what I'd seen. When I closed the email, Riley gave me a small nod across the unit, her expression fierce and proud. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope that the truth was too big for Patrice to smother. 2 days later, Raul opened a letter at our kitchen table, his fingers trembling. He read it once, then again. "They're inviting us to reapply for the vendor list," he whispered. "They said, audit review, reopened opportunities." His eyes widened with cautious hope. I leaned over his shoulder and read the lines myself, my pulse racing. For weeks, his shop had been shrinking under sudden cancellations. Now, there was a crack of light. "Don't celebrate yet," I said softly, pressing my hand over his. "This is only the beginning, but it's a start." That night, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Patrice. "Stop digging, Maddie. You won't like how this ends." My stomach tightened as I read the words glowing on the screen. She was still fighting, still sure she could scare me into silence. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and added the message to my compliance folder. I copied the text into my timeline, marking the date and time. Evidence worked better than anger. When I set the phone down, Raul slid his arm around me. "We'll get through this," he said. I nodded, but deep down I knew. The real battle hadn't even begun. By morning, whispers spread like wildfire through the halls. Patrice's badge had failed at the executive wing. Some said it was deactivated, others that she was on leave pending investigation. Staff traded rumors like playing cards, their voices pitched low but excited. I kept my eyes on my patients, moving with steady focus. Each preemie's breath felt like a reminder of why I started this fight. Behind me, nurses whispered, "Did you hear? Patrice might be suspended." I charted vitals without reacting. Midday, compliance stopped by the unit. One officer leaned close and asked me quietly, "Can you draft a stability plan for the NICU? We want to ensure smooth operation while the audit continues." I agreed, hiding the rush of adrenaline behind a calm nod. That night, when I drove home, Raul asked if anything new had happened. I just said, "She's on the sidelines now." His shoulders relaxed a little, but I knew better than to let down my guard. Patrice had claws, and cornered people often used them. Still, the shift in the air was real. The power she had carried so easily was slipping. With Patrice gone, even temporarily, the NICU breathed differently. Staff laughed more freely. Schedules were fair again, breaks were honored, and every machine check was logged carefully. I made sure of it. I reorganized assignments so that no one carried more than they could handle, and morale lifted almost overnight. One evening, the chief medical officer stopped by unannounced. He walked the halls quietly, observing. He watched nurses tending to fragile infants, saw Riley adjusting a ventilator with precision, and nodded approvingly. Before leaving, he pulled me aside. "This feels like a different unit," he said. His voice carried relief. I smiled politely, but inside I felt the weight of his words. Patrice had built her reputation on supposed efficiency, yet it took only days without her for the unit to thrive. The next morning, HR called me into a glass-walled office. A folder sat on the table, and 2 managers waited with careful expressions. My heart pounded as I sat down, notebook in hand. One manager cleared his throat. "We'd like to discuss an interim role." I gripped my pen tightly, bracing for what was coming. The pieces were aligning faster than I had dared to expect. The HR manager slid the folder toward me. Inside was a short proposal: interim NICU manager. They explained the audit might last months, and the unit needed steady leadership. "You're trusted," the CNO added. "The staff looked to you already. We'd like to make it official." I felt my pulse in my ears. The offer included a modest pay bump, but more than that, it was authority to protect the babies and shield staff from chaos. I nodded slowly, forcing my voice to stay even. "I'll do it." That night I told Raul at dinner. He grinned for the first time in weeks. "Perfect timing," he said. "The hospital just confirmed my shop is back on the vendor list. We're supplying again." Relief shone in his eyes. I reached across the table and took his hand. "It's not over, but we're moving forward." We clinked glasses of water like champagne, celebrating survival. But in the back of my mind, I knew Patrice wouldn't disappear quietly. Every victory so far had been matched with her shadow. The question was not if she would strike again, but when. The audit findings landed like a thunderclap. Compliance released a report that spread through every corner of the hospital. The documents showed Patrice had bypassed multiple safety checks to funnel millions in contracts to Brightwell Medical Supplies. Staff gathered in small clusters, reading the bullet points aloud. Defective incubators, untested ventilators, high-risk equipment slipped into service. The whispers grew heavier with each page. In the break room, someone muttered, "She risked babies' lives to line her pockets." Another nurse shook her head in disbelief, and she smiled while doing it. I kept quiet, sipping my coffee, though inside my chest hammered. By afternoon, her name was scrubbed from internal newsletters and award lists. Her framed photo in the hallway recognition board was taken down. The staff didn't cheer, but their silence was sharp. That evening, Roll showed me his updated contract agreement, larger than before, spanning 3 departments. "They want stability," he said. "They want people who deliver." I hugged him tightly, relief washing over me. The board announced an emergency meeting with external regulators. My phone buzzed with the invite. Attendance required. My hand stayed steady as I added the date to my notebook. The walls that had protected Patrice were gone. The news broke the next morning. Headlines flashed across local stations. Hospital manager linked to faulty equipment vendor. Patrice's face filled screens, her name tied to fraud and negligence. I sat in my office, lights dim, watching without expression. Staff peeked in, curious if I would gloat. I didn't. I only typed, calm and precise, adjusting schedules and patient assignments. In the cafeteria, whispers floated. "Did you see Channel 7? She's finished." Imagine gambling with lives like that. The mood was shock mixed with quiet relief. Parents of NICU babies called, demanding reassurance that their children were safe. I walked the halls, offering calm words, showing them how carefully we monitored equipment. That night, Raoul kissed my temple and said, "She can't touch us now." I wanted to believe it, but I knew better. Her name was ruined, yes, but power doesn't vanish, it shifts. The board chair emailed me directly. "Please prepare to attend tomorrow's board meeting. Bring your recommendations on NICU safety protocols." I closed the laptop, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself, "Stay factual, stay steady. Tomorrow would be more than testimony, it would be the pivot point of everything." The boardroom table gleamed under bright lights. Around it sat directors, compliance officers, and external regulators. I walked in with my binder, shoulders square. Nathan, one of the directors, smiled faintly, offering a nod of encouragement. I presented my plan. Accredited suppliers only, mandatory rotating audits, transparent procurement with staff oversight. I showed data on improved infant outcomes since strict monitoring began after Patrice's leave. My voice stayed calm, steady. "This isn't about blame," I said. "It's about patient safety and the families who trust us." The board murmured agreement. One director asked about vendor stability. I credited Rawls' company, explaining how his team met rigorous standards. I emphasized the hospital's need for vendors who cared about outcomes, not shortcuts. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. I was appointed permanent NICU manager. Relief flooded me, though I kept my expression professional. Then the board chair added, "And we've decided to name your husband's business our exclusive neonatal supplier." Gasps rippled across the room. I left the meeting clutching my binder, heart pounding. Everything Patrice tried to destroy, my career, my family's future, was now stronger than ever. The fallout came fast. Patrice resigned under pressure, her reputation shredded beyond repair. Rumors swirled that investigators were digging into fraud charges tied to Brightwell. Staff whispered about her expensive car disappearing from the parking lot, her office stripped bare overnight. I signed Rawls' vendor agreement at my desk, the pen smooth in my hand. With that stroke, our finances stabilized. His shop rehired the workers he had been forced to let go. At dinner, our son beamed as Raoul described fixing up the warehouse again. One night, as I tucked our boy into bed, he handed me a drawing. Crayon lines showed a hospital with big windows and tiny stick figure babies inside. Across the top, in crooked letters, he'd written, "Mom saves babies." My throat tightened as I kissed his forehead. Downstairs, Raoul poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "To second chances," he said. I raised my glass, though I knew it wasn't chance that brought us here. It was patience, evidence, and a refusal to let lies win. Patrice had gambled with lives and lost. And I had taken from her the one thing she cared about most, her legacy. I didn't take her house, her car, or her clothes. I didn't need to. What I took was bigger, her story, the power she abused, the future she tried to steal from me and my family. Her name would forever be linked to fraud and negligence, while mine now stood for safety and trust. As NICU manager, I watched my team flourish. Equipment was checked twice daily, logs reviewed weekly, and parents updated with full transparency. Every baby in our care had the protection they deserved. That was the victory. At home, Roll's shop thrived again. Contracts flowed steadily, employees returned, and our mortgage notices stopped arriving. The quiet at dinner felt like peace, not dread. Our son laughed more, his world safe again. Late one evening, I opened my notebook. On the first page, the word timeline stared back at me. Beneath it stretched months of notes, every small move that had led here. I closed the cover gently, almost reverently. By the book, I whispered. Every step. Calm, patient, steady, those had been my weapons. And in the end, they were enough to take everything she tried to keep from me.